And now, you're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
Good evening to all the listeners in this week for RBLR Sports. You are listening to the RBLR Rowdies show, and I am James Knowles here with my co-host, Carlos. Carlos, tell me, how are you doing? It's been a week without Rowdies, as we were just talking about before we started recording, but, you know, there's obviously other stuff going on. So how's your life been this past Rowdyless week?
It's been all right. There's definitely been a gap in what would take up a good 2 hours in my weekend.
Yeah.
And filling it in with other sports. I'm in the middle of finals, so it's definitely been a little more productive than the usual weekend would be. But yeah, I've been spending my time watching some extra, Tampa Bay sports. We got the Lightning yesterday. They killed it against the Leafs. Really good time. Really fun to watch. The Rays are on a bit of a hot streak right now, so that's been fun to watch. Even, as personally someone who's not a huge baseball guy, always cool to see our local teams killing it and doing well. And even up here at Georgetown, our lacrosse team just won the Big East Conference at home, and that was a really good time. So
Nice.
No Rowdies, but definitely other sports to fill in the gaps. But yeah, it's been a good week, and really excited to look ahead to this upcoming game against Phoenix we have next week. It should be a good time, and we'll get into all of that later on in this episode.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we did not have the game that we usually do to do a review of. So instead, we are going to do that preview, as you said, and as suggested by our producer Eureka. What do we do in this week when we have no game to review from the past week? Well, instead of that, why don't we take this time to do a State of the Rowdies Union? I guess that's what we would our State of the Rowdies address. It's much like a State of the Union speech. So. We're not going to give any speeches here, but we'll give you guys some analysis. And, if you agree, if you disagree, just let us know. Hopefully we get everything covered that we think that, is going on with the Rowdies, either positive or negative. Before we get into that, I do want to say, please follow RBLR Sports. We are at RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, please like and subscribe to our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Whatever you use, you can find us there. So, Carlos, let's jump into this here, and we are going to do our State of the Rowdies. And I like to think of this as, the Rowdies have been in a little bit of a rough patch, so it's kind of breaking it down into what can we control, what can't we control, all that kind of stuff. Before we even do that, though, I think it would be good to revisit the preseason expectations and where things were. So I will just let you know before we get into that. I'm not sure if you had heard this previously, Carlos, but I was under the impression after our first game, which we drew, that we had the chance to go on and win all of our games after that. So anyone who's been paying attention, I think that they know that the Rowdies did not quite do that. It was a little bit better than what we have been dealing with, to be fair. And I'll just read this out quickly, and then I'll turn it over to you. So the first game we drew with Birmingham Legion away, and then we beat Indy 11 at home. We beat Atlanta United away. We drew with Hartford Athletic at home, not the best result. We drew with Oakland Roots away, which was actually a pretty good result considering the game. And then if we jump ahead to our fifth league game after that, it was a home loss to the Miami FC. Of course, that did follow a 6-0 win over the Villages, but anyway, those were my predictions that kind of got blown out of the water there. So, Carlos, what were you thinking towards the beginning of the season, and how did your expectations go? Were they met? Were they maybe not met at this point? I feel like a lot of fans might be able to say that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think most of us can confidently say that our preseason expectations have definitely not been met. And again, it's really early on in the season. We've played 10 games. There's a lot of soccer left to be played. But at about this point in the season, I mean, you'd think we'd be in the top 3 with the squad we had. Last year, obviously, we fell just short of the title. But I mean, we were one of the best teams in the league. We have on paper like one of the strongest rosters, and that's continuing this season. I mean, if you look at the players we have and you compare it with some of the other teams, we have a really stacked team. I mean, we have really good depth in the midfield, and we have so many attacking options. It's kind of overwhelming. It's kind of a problem right now. I mean, we have too many options. We're seeing a lot of rotation. I mean, a fan favorite in Juan Tejada, who got a lot of playing time last year and the season before, hasn't been seeing the field that much. And that's a good problem to have. But like we touched on last week, once we get down the field, we end up at the defense, where obviously we're having depth problems. And we talked a lot about that last week, so I won't go into that too much. But it's fair to say, for me personally, I did expect us to be conceding more than we did last year. And I think that's a really high bar to meet that we had last year, because of how solid that defense and that chemistry with Evan Loro was. I mean, that crazy shutout streak was just incredible. So it's expected that we were going to concede more goals. And obviously that's, been met. I am a little worried about some of our offensive production. But I mean, recently that's kind of, started to be blown out of the water. I mean, we scored 2 goals against a really good San Diego side, and usually 2 goals will be enough at least to get a draw. But like I said, that defensive issue is going to be something to keep an eye on. And, 10 games into the year, we're in 7th place, not where we want to be. And I mean, I think there's a lot of room to grow here. So I'm not going to say like we're just miserable right now. There's a lot of space to grow. But yeah, definitely not in that top 3 range I was looking for. What about you, James? Where did you see the team?
Yeah, I think coming into this season, like I said, with that prediction that I had made previously, I expected this team to do pretty well, similar to you, obviously. And I think that a big problem, obviously, was when Forrest Lasso left. I think that caught a lot of people by surprise, because it was so close to the beginning of the preseason that everybody was about to, start seeing the potential for lineups, or at least the potential for new players, all that kind of stuff. Evan Loro, we kind of knew about, because at least, his situation had been cleared a little bit ahead of time, and everybody expected Raiko Rosarena was ready to step in and, take over that role. We'll get to Raiko Rosarena's playing time in a bit here, but I think that people were pretty much set with the goalkeeping position, and then it was really just filling in Forrest Lasso's spot. Now, personally, I was under the impression that Connor Antley was going to be there from the beginning, because in talking with Neil Collins in the past, Connor Antley has played that role, and he has, or I'm sorry, he was signed to play in that role, and he has filled in that role at certain moments in the last season. It was mostly when they had to take Forrest Lasso off for this reason or that reason, but that was originally what he was brought in to do. And then he showed himself so well as a right wing back that he started playing there. I was under the impression that he could do that, and then we would have somebody step into the right wing back role, whether that was Sebastian Dalgard or Dayon Harris, both of whom have also played there. So yeah, it's been a little interesting to see. As you said, this is a pretty good roster at this level. These are all guys who have been, let's say on the fringe of MLS teams in the past, or have been, semi-regular starters at moments in their career. And maybe they have stepped down to the USL Championship level, where they're getting more playing time, obviously. Some of them were not at that level, but they have clearly shown themselves to be very capable players. I think Lewis Hilton would fit in that category, because he has shown himself to be so good at his role for this team, even if he never did play at the MLS level. And I think that, overall, what really concerned me going into this year was not necessarily that we didn't have a bad team. What I would say I thought might have been a problem was that we didn't really upgrade. If you look at good teams in other leagues, whether that is in soccer or outside of soccer, the teams that stay at the top are not just the ones that have the best squads one year and then they kind of stay that way. They generally do have to improve the squad. And I was wondering if maybe, we didn't do a good enough job at keeping our team. I wouldn't say that we're complacent, but certainly we could have been more on our heels about it. You got to keep the guys as hungry as possible, and then I guess that bleeds into complacency, which I do not agree that we are a complacent team by any means. You can't be with Neil Collins yelling at you in the locker room, if I had to guess what it would look like in there. But Yeah, I just don't know that, those upgrades to keep a team going at the highest level, that's what I thought we might have been missing. And unfortunately, I don't know if that is definitely the case, but it does seem that other teams have been able to close the gap between where they were last year and where we were last year.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great point too to touch on. Is I'm going through the roster right now. Like you said, I mean, there really isn't any particular weak point. I mean, there's so many good players, especially in the midfield, that I think would
Yeah.
start at most other clubs in this league. The guys on our bench would start in a lot of teams in the USL. And with regards to new signings, I think that's a great point because, I'm looking at some of the guys we signed. We signed Kyle Gregg in the attack. We got Etu in the midfield to kind of reinforce that center midfield position. Jake Arman came in for the wing. And then Timmy Mel was kind of an interesting, more low-key kind of signing. And it's funny because now he might be the guy that we have to depend on to fill in that defensive position. But I think it's a great point because with all due respect to those players, they're fantastic players. I don't think they were necessarily upgrades by any means from where we were last season. I think it added some depth and into the rotation, but I think it's a great point to make because I don't think we were necessarily going for a guy that's going to get like 90 minutes of playing time every week. Etu and Ekra seem to be kind of rotating a lot. They're both good players, really good at kind of like filling in for each other, especially in this last stretch of games where we've had so many games. Kyle Gregg has been a great forward. He's really added to the rotation as well. But again, not somebody who was going to come in here and start 90 minutes and get full playing time every week, every game, because he just wasn't that. He wasn't what we were looking for. I think we were really comfortable with Sebastian Guanzati and Steven Dos Santos as our like main guys. So it's a good point to make and something to reflect on here. I wouldn't say complacency, like you said, is a great word for it because, I mean, having made it to the finals for 2 seasons in a row without really having that big trophy to show for it, I wouldn't say that's complacency because they haven't gotten to that last, trophy. I mean, they're getting there. They got those 2 Eastern Conference titles, but they haven't gotten the big one yet. And I know, like you said, Neil Collins is definitely in there, motivating the boys to keep that in mind, to finish the mission, finish the job. So it's really interesting to think about here, looking ahead. My big question with regards to our forwards and the Kyle Gregg signing, we brought in Jake LaCava as well. That's a name I forgot to mention, who in theory is a midfielder, but has been playing much more like a forward. So we have all this talent at the forward position with really only like 2 slots to fill every game at the forward role. My question is now with like less games, a less crowded schedule, which will obviously be good for, like resting time in between games and whatnot. My question is, how are we going to manage all those forwards? There's a lot of talent in there. Sebastian Guanzati, Steven Dos Santos. Lucky Mkosan has always been kind of a sub, late super sub. Kyle Gregg has been getting more playing time. I'm really curious to see what Neil Collins is going to go with up top. I really like the Sebastian Guanzati, Steven Dos Santos combo. But frankly, it hasn't been as productive as it was last season. So we're going to have to see where he goes with that. And I'm wondering what you think, James, might be the best combo up top, because I've heard a lot of people throwing around Kyle Gregg and Steven Dos Santos, Kyle Gregg and Sebastian Guanzati. I'm seeing a lot of Juan Tejada being thrown around too. So I'm curious about what you think Neil Collins is going to go with, and if you agree that maybe that's, the best duo up top, or what you think's the best duo up top.
Yeah, so Steven Dos Santos, I think, had an incredible year last year. Obviously, everybody knows what Sebastian Guenzati did last year. I think it was going to be difficult for both of them to hit those same heights. Steven Dos Santos spent a good portion out injured, but between the two of them, the goals that they scored were both impeccably timed and, actually just a lot. I think that, they're going to be impeccably timed at some point just because they had scored so many between them. And you have to look at it that way too. But I don't know that it's fair to say 10 games in that they have regressed. That's a super, that's a ridiculous word when you're this far into the season. Maybe if we get 30 games in and this is the amount of goals that they have scored, that's something that we can start to think about. But right now, I think it's totally ridiculous to say anything like that. Kyle Gregg, I believe, was originally brought in to be the backup option to Steven Dos Santos, which doesn't mean that he wouldn't be starting some games at some point, of course. But I do personally think that Steven Dos Santos still has it in him to be our top starter. And I would always back Sebastian Guenzati at this point in his career and his form to continue up top. Now, what I said for the beginning of the season, to take us back to our expectations a little bit, my original impression for the starting lineup when Forrest Lasso had moved and we had kind of finalized it before the first game, I thought that our back three were going to be, I believe, Guillen, Aintley, Scarlett, and then the midfields were going to be Araman, Wyke, Hilton, and Dayon Harris. And then up top, I was picturing Leo Fernandez on one wing, Steven Dos Santos in the middle, and Sebastian Guenzati kind of on the other wing, but, free to roam, of course, because that's something that he's going to do regardless. Now, Sebastian Dalgard came in on the right wing back spot, locked that down until he went out injured because he was playing so well. So I was wrong on that account. Jake Araman has not been a regular starter, though he has certainly got a couple so far. I don't think that the thing that I was expecting to take place on the left wing has occurred either. So what I was really expecting there was Jake Araman would move to the left wing back spot because he can do it very well. But in addition to that, I expected Leo Fernandez to really light it up top and start playing very, very well as that kind of left winger kind of hybrid where he's moving in the midfield, out of the midfield, into the attack as well, and helping Sebastian Guenzati, I should say, and Steven Dos Santos up top. But yeah, there have been mixed results with him playing up top. So Leo Fernandez had, I think, one very poor game where he started up top. It was a game when Neil Collins was out of the country getting further coaching certifications. And afterwards, I was talking with John Stead, and he had talked about Steven or Leo Fernandez maybe not living up to the billing at that role. And then the next game afterward, it was the case that I think Leo, he started at left wing back and was moved up into that winger spot. And he did much better, I thought. So, obviously one game you can't go off of anything with that. It's kind of been a mixed bag, really. And I don't know what to make of it. I think that Leo Fernandez has it in him to play that left wing role, and I certainly think that Jake Araman has it in him to play the left wing back role. But he's going to have to get used to the runs that entails, and I don't think that necessarily he's at the same level that Leo Fernandez is at for playing that role. But of course, he's been at this club for over 100 appearances. Of course, he's going to know it better. So these are all things that you have to take into consideration. What I would definitely say, like you said, Steven Dos Santos, Sebastian Guenzati up top, and one player that I hadn't considered as a starter before the season started, Jake LaCava. He's obviously come in and scored a ton of goals for, the amount of games that we've played. He's definitely worked his way into the starting lineup for me. So I would like to see him up top with Steven Dos Santos, Sebastian Guenzati, keep Leo Fernandez at left wing back, get Sebastian Dalgard back at right wing back once he's back from injury. And that's what I'm saying should be our attacking unit.
Yeah, no, the Jake LaCava addition has really been great to see. I mean, I think it was against San Diego, that kind of individual effort where he just streaked down the field and just finished that goal by himself on his left foot. It was so impressive. And it really made me appreciate what he has in him and the talent he can bring to the squad. But yeah, I mean, like you touched on, some of these injuries that have been affecting us, you mentioned Dalgard. That's been definitely a huge one. Obviously, we've talked about the Castellanos injury in the past, and how that's affected our defense and that whole situation in the back line. The injuries are out of our control, obviously, And we're really hoping Dahlgren gets back soon to help reinforce us on the wing. But I mean, as for what we can control, I mean, we still have a really good team. The squad is, really talented, like we've touched on. I think we're just waiting for that one game for it all to kind of come together, for it to kind of just click. Because everything's there on the table. Neil Collins is just, he's fiddling around with the team right now and trying to figure out what is the right formation, what are the right dynamics, what kind of chemistry needs to be built here for that all to just finally click. And I thought personally that game against FC Tulsa a few weeks ago, I think it was April 16th, that 3-1 win. It was still pretty early on in the season. But I thought that game was kind of going to be that game where it all started to finally click. It was such a great performance. I mean, it started off quick with a Lewis Hilton goal. Kyle Gregg followed it up in the 37th minute. My dad was with me at that game, and he was very adamant that Kyle Gregg should be the starter after that. He was just enamored. He was enamored by Kyle Gregg's performance, and I couldn't blame him. He was playing really, really well. And then Dion Harris got his first goal that game too, and I thought he was going to be much more of a factor than he has been. But unfortunately, I don't think that's been the game where it's really come together yet, because we saw that after that, the results that came after they haven't been there. So I think we're all just waiting for that to happen. I think this game, again, we're going to touch on this in a little bit, but this upcoming game against Phoenix is a really, really, really good opportunity to make that happen, for it all to, like I said, for it all to just click. Hopefully that's the game. If not, there's plenty of games to play still. There's a lot of soccer. But apart from the attack, apart from the defense, I mean, we're just going to have to see. Like, I can't really pinpoint any other just major problems other than that depth in the back line. And I think that's what makes the Rowdies squad this year so fascinating. It's kind of just an enigma right now. And I don't know if you guys saw this article that I think it came from the USL website itself, actually. It was something along the lines of don't panic, the Rowdies, have everything they need to still be a championship side. And I saw some fans of other teams got kind of upset by that. And was the Tampa bias, the leagues in Tampa and whatnot. Yeah. But I mean, I did think that was a really good article. I took a look at it and they had a point. I mean, we still have everything we need to be a championship squad. So I'm not necessarily panicking right now. I know a lot of people have decided to push the panic button and call it a season. This is done. We've gotten complacent. We're not winning a championship ever again. I think Tampa sports fans have a tendency to do that with, kind of what's happened in our sports scene for the past decade. But I'm not worried yet. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. Very excited for this Phoenix game. Apart from that, I don't think there's any other big problems. Can you pinpoint any other problems on the squad, James? I'm not sure I can think of any.
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily with the squad. I think that, we do have a section here that I want to get to before we hit on the standings and then do that preview of the Phoenix game. And there are, a couple problems that I think we need to fix, but I don't necessarily think that has to do with the squad. Losing Forrest Lasso, obviously that's a problem. How did we replace him? Robert Castellanos lost him immediately. So, that's the one issue with the squad, as it were, is the depth, but there's still depth plenty to fill in that spot and the places where Connor Antley would have been playing that we can, make sure. It's just, it's a couple of badly placed injuries, honestly, is what it has been. Because when Castellanos goes down, Antley has to move back. When Antley has to move back, then someone has to go to right wing back, and Sebastian Dalgard, then he goes down with the injury. So I think that that's been obviously a problem. So there's a little bit of a depth issue. As you said, there's definitely enough quality to fill in there and get us to where we need to be. We just haven't been able to do it. And I think that plays partly down to the schedule, which we have been bemoaning for several weeks now, of course. One thing that I will say with Dayon Harris, he has been the right wing back when Sebastian Dalgard has been out. And I think that Dayon Harris's best game was the game against Orlando City in the Open Cup. For anyone who did not see it, it was the case that in the first half, there really wasn't a lot of attacking from Orlando City down their left wing, which would be our right side, of course. So Dayon Harris didn't have to worry about defending that much. Now, obviously, if we're playing a regular team, it's going to be different because Orlando City had a a right fullback playing at the left wing back spot, and they were allowing their right wing back Huon to get up and down their right wing and our left wing, and they were much more purposeful moving down that wing and getting the attacks going there. That's where we had to really defend. Dayon Harris, as I said, he just had all the time in the world to get up and down his side, and he caused a lot of problems for Orlando, which unfortunately we couldn't capitalize on until he then went out as a substitution. I think Dayon Harris is best as a wingback when he doesn't really have to worry about defending, and I think that that is a problem if we're going to have him starting for the 90 minutes at times. That's why I do prefer having Connor Antley or Sebastian Dalgard there, and then Dayon Harris has done pretty well actually going up top, and he was playing as a target man for a couple minutes in one of our most recent games, and he put several players off of their game when they were trying to settle the ball, and they thought that they had enough time to bring it down, pass it back to their goalkeeper. All of a sudden, Dayon Harris is on their back and he's won the ball off of them. Unfortunately, neither of those turned into goals either. So that's another issue that we'll get into execution here. But I think that Dayon Harris, he is good at that role. He just needs to do it under certain conditions. And, this will come up when we talk about Phoenix, because you specifically have a section on them defending down the wing. So we'll get back to that, but I do want to get into this thing here. So this is going to be a positive show. I still think that we want to keep it uplifting for everybody listening, because it has been a rough month for everybody who is listening to our show specifically for the Rowdies. Hopefully you're listening for all sports, because I think we do a great job covering them. But there are some problems that we want to look at, so we want to fix them. That's how we want to uplift the fans. And one issue that I do want to look at here is conceding first. Carlos, what do you see with the Rowdies, and what do you think that we need to do a bit better to make sure that we can kind of cut this out?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a little bit last week. It seems like some of these past few games, the intensity to start the game just hasn't really been there. It seems like the other team needs to kick us in the butt, per se, to to kind of get us going. And like I've touched on, like, we have the talent to score quickly and to score a lot, as was proven by the Lewis Hilton goal, like the beautiful free kick against Memphis, immediately after they scored. I don't think it was more than 3 minutes after Memphis scored. The talent's there. I mean, they just need to start quicker. And I think this extra week that we've had to prepare for Phoenix, kind of a little bit of the hype around that game, the nationally televised spotlight, I think that's going to serve well to get the intensity going early, because I think that's what we need. I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, that I can see with the attack, or something about the strategy or the tactics around the attack that have prevented us from scoring first. Or, I mean, apart from obviously our defensive issues, like, there's nothing really just calling out to me that's like, this is why we're always conceding first. I think it just comes down to the mentality of the team. And I like I said, I keep talking about this Phoenix game, and I know we're going to touch on it and do a whole preview on that in a little bit. But I think, such a high quality and, nationally televised spotlight is going to be really good for that intensity to kind of revitalize that squad and revitalize the energy that we need. I think that's the biggest thing, just the mentality and the intensity. What about you? Is there anything that you're looking at that's kind of calling out to you?
Not necessarily. I think obviously it's going to be, that is a mentality thing when you're not always up for it from the beginning, because, it's just the case that in professional sports, you do have to go from the first minute to the last minute, because otherwise somebody's going to penalize you for it. And the Rowdies have been penalized, as we've seen, for their lack of a quick start. I think that the thing that we can, take hope in is that certainly, as you said, that there is a huge platform for this game. I think that the Rowdies are going to, well, everybody knows obviously that it's going to be on TV, who's involved. So they're going to keep that in mind when they're out there. And I think that that's going to play a role, not just in their psyches, but also, it's going to make sure that they kind of want to show that they are the team that they know they can be for the audience that's going to be watching. And what I have in mind for that is not just, I don't know, do the smelling salts a couple more before before they blow the starting whistle. But I think that what you're supposed to do as a professional athlete is be at a very high intensity level, but you also need to be calm. So this kind of leads into another problem that we've been having, which we're going to touch on a little bit more, but it's that execution, which is something that I spoke about with Connor Antley a little while ago. And he, we had a little bit of a conversation about that. But yes, you do need to be and like dialed in. You need to be able to focus on exactly what you're supposed to do, but you also need to be able to execute it properly and not quickly. You don't want to do it so fast that unfortunately, you've just given the ball away. You went so fast that your touch was bad. You went so fast that you actually didn't even make the right decision because you didn't see that there was a better option over on the left side, let's say. So those are all things that need to be going on. And it's an intensity, but it's also, I think that one thing that Neil Collins does like to, or that one thing that we can take hope from, is that Neil Collins does make sure that the team is, they are dialed in. That is something that we need to make sure, but they're also aware of what they need to do in every situation so that they can hopefully slow it down in their mind enough to weigh the options such as they are and make the best one created by the runs that the players who don't have the ball are all showing and showing the player who does have the ball. And those are all things that need to come into play. We just need to make sure that, everybody can do what they're supposed to do in the right moments, but not, not think about making a mistake. Because if you're in that mindset, obviously, I think most people are aware that's when you do start to make those mistakes. One thing that I will bring up as a potential other problem within the conceding first umbrella problem is I don't know how well I've seen the Rowdies handle the press from other teams when we have the ball at the back from the very beginning. Carlos, is this something that you've noticed as a problem?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times, and obviously enough, like as fans, we've kind of noticed this as you've brought it up. I mean, it's not it's easily noticeable when you start making silly mistakes in the back because of that press, and that's why I think you jotted it down in our notes here, because it's a problem. I mean, it's easy to spot because you can kind of see the chaos that kind of starts to happen at the back.
Yeah.
And attackers, like, they smell that blood in the water. If you're on the other team, they can feel that chaos coming. And that is just it's so tough to watch, and it gives you so much anxiety when you're watching the game as a fan, because it feels so easy to prevent a goal from that situation. In my mind, you're just like, oh, just kick the ball, just like boot it away, just get it out of the area. But in that moment, I mean, the defense are just trying to, keep possession, and they're trying not to make silly mistakes. And when you're in your head, like you touched on, about trying not to make that mistake, that's when the mistakes happen. And again, the talent's there. It's a mentality. It's just one moment of thinking, of overthinking sometimes, or underthinking, maybe just doing something instinctively and it being the wrong choice. It's happened a few times. I can't think of a, concrete example right now. I don't know if you have something in your mind that you want to mention. But I've seen it a few times, and not necessarily that they've led to goals directly, but losing possession like that is just so demoralizing. And I'm sure that's something that the boys are working on in practice this week, especially with such a high tempo team like Phoenix on the horizon. That's gonna be something they have to deal with. Is there a moment in your head that you're thinking about that, kind of brought to light this issue for you?
I think the first time that I wrote it down, or not the first time that I wrote it down for the whole season, but the first time that I picked up on it as being like a problem for over 10 minutes, let's say, if I'm not mistaken, it was the game against Hartford, which we drew at home 1-1. And I think that Hartford came out and they were, well, there's the other thing that I want to bring up as well. Is just the Rowdies obviously are known as one of the best teams in this league, if not the best, from last year and the year before, etc. So when teams play us, they are playing to the best of their ability. You know, it's unfortunately the case that a lot of teams, part of that mentality, which we were just talking about, is, you know, you got to be dialed in, but you're definitely more dialed in when you're playing against the supposedly quote unquote better team. So when we were playing Orlando City in Orlando City, you could see that all the boys were as intense as possible, and they were executing to the best of their ability. They were focusing not only just on what they were doing in the moment, because they got all of their touches right, they got all of their passes right, but they were also intense about getting to the second ball first. They were intense about sprinting to get to a ball that they had no right to try to win, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, there were so many things that went wrong that day. But then you see it against Hartford, and Hartford were not the best team last season. And I think that Hartford, when we were out there, they were playing up to our level as the better team, again, quote unquote. So when Hartford went away, I think after the game, I think it was Neil Collins who said that he overheard somebody. I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were. Regardless, someone from Hartford turned to someone else from Hartford and said, "Hey, man, we just went down to the best team in the league and we got a tie. That's about all you can ask for." And, you know, that's how other teams view that. That's how other teams view us. We are the big dog, so to speak, here. And to come out and get a result against the Rowdies means something. Everybody's going to be that dialed in that we've been talking about, and we have to be able to handle it. But I think that, as you said, yeah, just boot it long. The Rowdies don't like to do that. Of course, the Rowdies like to play their game, and they like to get the result the way that they want to get the result. So they're going to try to play it out of the back. And sometimes they just need to be able to realize that there are going to be pressure points coming from this or that player. They need to realize, you know, when they are setting off the other team's triggers, maybe try to avoid that. And obviously, if they do press, then yes, you do need to at some point consider just kicking the ball long and avoiding getting yourselves in trouble. But all of those things are things that we need to take into consideration, along with what I think is the largest issue that the Rowdies have been dealing with, and that is simply execution. This goes back to the conversation that I had with Connor Antley, where I asked him, you know, it was right after the game where he had played right wing back against San Diego, and we unfortunately lost after having been ahead at halftime. And he said, you know, he wasn't sure if it was partly his fault or if it was partly on the strikers. He said probably it was a little bit of both. That makes sense, obviously, that these crosses are not turning into goals consistently, because everybody, I think, listening knows at this point, we are a pretty cross-heavy team, but the execution of these crosses are unfortunately low recently, because they have not been turning into the chances or the goals that we know that the Rowdies can produce off of them. So something that I talked about with Neil Collins, again, related to this was, you know, is this something that's a mentality issue? Is this something that is just, you know, maybe there's a monkey on the player's back, is what I asked him about. And he said when it comes to crossing, he sees two issues. Either there are not enough players in the box, or the quality of the crossing has been too poor. Now, he doesn't think that the quality of the crossing has been too poor, although I would say that does need some work too. Are there enough players getting in the box is definitely an issue that he can address with players running off of the ball. That's a huge thing that they're going to work on in training when they get the chance to do so. But the other issue goes back to the scheduling that we've been having, where Neil Collins told me this as well. The team will have a day, you know, their game, then they'll have a day off, then they will have a recovery day, then they'll get to, you know, work on whatever they can. But there's so little time ultimately when you're having a game every 3 days or 4 days, whatever it is, based on the last couple of weeks, that, you know, we can't work on getting these runs more accurate. We can't work on getting these crosses into better spots. And we can't work on, okay, Mr. Right wing back, let's say it's Deion Harris, Connor Antley, Sebastian Dalgard. This is where you need to get. And if you are in this position with the ball, you need to put it into this spot. If you're in this position with the ball, instead, you need to put it into that spot. And whoever is the left wing back, you need to get your ass up there and you need to get into the spot so that you can be on the end of it, or whoever. So if they have more time to work on this in training, then obviously that's going to help them work out some kinks. And I think that the last 2 weeks, hopefully, are going to be the biggest movement in our progression from just putting in cross after cross after cross to putting in cross and maybe a cross and maybe a goal and maybe a cross and a goal. I don't want to see as many as we're doing and, we get through 10 and a half and nothing has gone in. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the execution stuff, I think, like we've touched on, I think, again, it goes back to some mentality stuff, like you mentioned, the monkey on the back type thing, or I mean, it's going to sound like very, Rowdies supremacy, Rowdies elitism, but we do sometimes tend to, quote unquote, play down to our opponent. And any team that, seemingly we should be beating, there's been tendencies to just not have that same intensity. And like I've been touching on, a shot against Phoenix here this upcoming week is going to be really, really good, because it's going to be impossible to quote unquote play down to our competition, because Phoenix realistically is, at our level, if not better. So we'll have a chance to, I think, rekindle that intensity throughout, the field, but especially in that attack, to kind of adjust that mentality, which would hopefully, in theory, lead to more goals. Hopefully for, especially like I'm thinking off the bat, Sebastian Guanzati, who only has 1 goal so far this year. I
Right.
think this could be his shot to, get that up and running. I think this will be a good opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to this game, because of that mentality stuff. I think this is going to be the chance to, again, I'm going back to what I said earlier, but we're all clicks. So I'm not getting my hopes like super high, but at the same time, I am like, I'm really looking forward to this game, and I'm hoping this is the, I don't want to say the turning point, because again, it's too early in the season to call it a turning point. But I want it to be a moment we look back on at the end of our championship season this year. So yeah, I'm excited for it. Anything else you want to add on that, James, on the mentality stuff?
I think that mentality is a part of it, a big part of it, obviously. I think it was Bobby Warshaw, who is a former soccer player. Now he's an analyst, and he talks about, he's a he's a Stanford guy, and he was something engineering major, so he's all into the science behind all of this. And he talks about what is the difference between a good team and a great team, a good player and a great player, all that. And he talks about it's the players who can get themselves, everybody's kind of usually coming in around 90% intensity, whatever it is, moving into a game. Can you get yourself to 92%, to 94%, to 98%? But in the middle of the game, or moving through it, those are the instances where you see a player go from where their base is to getting close to their ceiling. And that's what I want to see. Yeah, this is all that, and this is all about mentality leading into intensity. So yes, as you said, we cannot play down this game. There is no playing down. Both teams are going to be playing up, and if you can get yourself into that space against this team, hopefully then you can put yourself on a streak where you can kind of keep hitting those heights for a couple of games at least. And then, maybe after that, you've got a streak going where you're just so confident it doesn't matter what happens, everything is going to go in. But we'll have to see what the result is beforehand, obviously. Let's not count those chickens before they hatch. But we've danced around this game for a while now. I think we might as well get into it. Let's do the standings, and then I will turn it over to you, Carlos, to start our preview against Phoenix Rising, one of our biggest rivals right now. So the Rowdies are currently in 7th, right in the last playoff spot for the East. We sit behind Louisville City, Pittsburgh Riverhounds, Detroit City, Memphis 901, Indy 11, and the Miami FC. That last one certainly is a little tough for us. Louisville City have 24 points from 10 games. And I don't know if they're running away with it at this point. Everybody's going to have a rough patch in the season. That's just the nature of sport. So, let's not say that we can just stick it around. I want to see the Rowdies move up the table and try to get themselves back towards the top. Maybe they won't even win in the East. Maybe they won't do what they did last season. I can understand that. That's a very hard thing to do once, let alone 2 years in a row. So, Maybe we temper our expectations for that, but certainly the Rowdies should be up towards the top, and I would like to see us get back up there. For the West, really quickly, it goes Colorado Springs, San Antonio, San Diego, Phoenix Rising, and then Sacramento Republic for the top spots there. And yeah, let's get into Phoenix Rising. We have a game coming up here, Carlos. It's going to be intense.
It's going to be intense. Yes, I keep touching on this game, and I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. In theory, we have like a show structure and plan and whatnot, but I just can't help but keep chomping at the bit to keep talking about this game. I'm sorry. Like, it's going to be a great time, and I'm really looking forward to it. So let's get into that. Phoenix's recent home run form has been really impressive. They've only dropped one game at home so far, and it was to that San Diego side that we drew with at home last week. So they're a great squad. You know, obviously we can talk for a while about every single player. Some guys to note: Greg Hurst leads the team with 4 goals. Quinn in the midfield is just, you know, a constant just rock for that squad.
Yeah.
Darnell King playing at the fullback position, former Rowdy, getting a lot of playing time out there. Just a really good, really deep squad that we'll be facing. And that'll come in handy for them because they travel out to Sacramento this Wednesday for a tough match against Republic. That'll be a good game. I'll definitely be tuning in for that. 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to tune into that. Get a little, I guess, sneak peek of what we might be up against.
Yeah.
That's part of their Open Cup run. So that squad will be rotating slightly. I'm sure of that. But yes, Sacramento is a very talented team. Like you noted, James, they are just one spot behind Phoenix. So it'll be a tough game, and hopefully we can root those Republic boys to drain out some energy from Rising, soften up the competition a little bit for us going into Sunday. Lots of squad rotation for them between their last game and the game before. Really interesting to note because on May 1st, 2 weeks ago, they lost 3-0 to LA Galaxy 2, a team that they should most definitely be winning against. And then just 6 days later, they beat San Antonio FC by the same score, 3-0. San Antonio is actually second placed in the West right now. So just when you think they might be having their issues, I brought this up in last week's episode, losing 3-0 to LA Galaxy 2 is not a great look. Just when you think they might be having some issues, they show again who they really are, and they just, dominate San Antonio at home. This is a really good team. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you can look at the highlights from that LA Galaxy 2 game, and I think that was somewhat of a fluke. They just had a bad start, and it affected the rest of their game. Frankly, this is a really good team, and it's going to be a really tough game. But you touched on this very briefly, and I want to get into this little analysis breakdown, James. For how good a team this Phoenix squad is, I do think this is a good tactical matchup for us. Some of their struggles on the defensive side of things, actually most of their struggles, seem to come from a really fast attack on the wings. They seem to have their struggles defending that for one reason or another. Against LA Galaxy 2, all 3 of the goals they conceded were on the wings. Even against San Antonio, they didn't concede any goals, but some of the most dangerous moments for Phoenix were those San Antonio wing attacks. And this has been my criticism of this Rowdy squad every once in a while, that we're very predictable. We do a lot of this cross-heavy attack. We rely a lot on our wing backs to just go up and do their thing. Whether it's Leo Fernandez, Dalgard, Dion Harris, or whatnot. We do rely on them a lot. But I think this might be their time to shine because Phoenix seems to be, for one reason or another, struggling against that. Whether Dalgard is healthy or not, we don't really know. He could be back in theory for that game against the Rising squad. But if he's not, I'm really, really looking forward to what Dion Harris can do on the wing. I think he might be our X factor this game. He's definitely not the first player you mention or you think of when you think of the Rowdies squad or the Rowdies attack, but I think he could be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, factors this upcoming game. I think he could, in theory, put up a couple assists, maybe get his second goal of his career, just because he has so much pace on the wing. So I'm really hoping they're working on those crosses, like you touched on, James, during practice, because I think this is a chance for that to really come into play. Like I said, this is a really good team. We're going to have a tough time defending against Greg Hurst, just a really talented target man who has just great, frame to hold up the play, but he's also dynamic. He can move around, so he's going to be tough to deal with for our boys in the back. We'll see what we can do. Like I said, I think this is a great matchup for us. I'm curious to hear what you think on our chances against this really talented Rising squad, though, James.
Yeah, I got to say, Greg Hurst. I know that he was the top striker in USL League One last season, and I kind of wanted the Rowdies to sign him coming into this year because he's a Scottish guy. I thought that, Neil Collins, hey, we got a Scottish coach. Maybe we got that connection. Maybe he could sign for us. Unfortunately, obviously, we know that did not happen, but whatever. That's fine. There are plenty of good players out there. Steven Dos Santos is good. Kyle Gregg has come in, and he's perfectly good up top as well, especially in that backup role where we got Lucky and Kasana coming off the bench behind whoever is out there. All very good. So, yeah, I think that's one thing to get out of the way. When it comes to injuries, I don't know who is where, but Sebastian Dalgard he is coming back from injury at some point. We don't know when, and we do not have a Zoom call with the Rowdies until Thursday. So that will be one of my questions. But for the time being, we are out of the loop, unfortunately. Yeah, for this team, I want to say their starting 11 has been roughly, and, they do change these players every so often, obviously, but for the most part, it has been Ben Lunt, Darnell King, Kevin Lambert. I believe it's Joe Farrell at the back, Ryan Flood, Arturo Rodriguez, Aiden Quinn, Luis Manuel Sejas, Joey Calistri, Claudio Repetto, and then Greg Hurst. So how are they going to change this up to probably deal with the Rowdies lineup? I'm not entirely sure what their best formation is. They mostly seem to play in a 4-3-3 or something close to a 4-2-3-1, something like that. Maybe they'll try to cover what we do down the wing, something that you had just mentioned, Carlos. I'm not too sure, but I think with all of the time that we have prepared for this game, we should really expect a result if we're back at our best. And that's what I'm hoping to see, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And with all this time, like you said, we've had to practice and to think about Phoenix, to think about how we're going to approach this game. I think we have a really good shot to pull off a good result away from home at, the home of a perennial title contender here. One of Phoenix's really good strengths, you touched on their formation as a 4-3-3. That's the formation I've seen in most of their games. They have the talent and the speed in the attack to run that really well. They play really well out of the back, and they have great transition play. They have great speed on the counterattack. And I think that's something that the Rowdies know. I'm sure that's something that Neil Collins knows. If I know this as a casual fan from the side, I'm sure these guys who do this for a living are taking good note of this and planning out how to, counter that very well. So I'm not particularly worried about that. With all this extra time, like I said, I feel like they probably are working on a game plan to counter that. I think we have a really good shot. And, if we're giving our predictions now, I think the Rowdies are looking at a possible, it's a bold take, especially with this run of form. I think we could be looking at a 2-1 W away from home.
Wow.
Again, this is it's bold, and I'm not feeling like hyper confident about this, but I really like this matchup for our guys on the wing. And like I keep mentioning, this could be that game where it all kind of just clicks. I think Guenzati is going to get on the score sheet here. I couldn't tell you who scores the second goal. I'm sure it'll be somebody we won't expect, some way out of the midfield or something like that. But I really feel like this could be Guenzati's, clicking moment here. So I'm going to stick with that 2-1 win away from home at the title contenders. With all this extra time, I think they are looking at a good matchup. And tactically, like I said, this is the type of formation we want to be playing against. This is the type of defense we want to be playing against. Really good team, but I'm confident that they could at least pull out a draw. But I'm going to stick with a 2-1 W away from home as my official prediction here.
All right, I love that. We're not even doing hot takes this week, but you come in with one. We're going to get back to that next week, but you are already on the board, it seems like. All right. Well, I was not going quite so big. I am going to take my prediction and go with a 2-2 draw. A 2-2 draw. So if you are going 2-1, I will take the 2-2, and we're going to have to see, but I definitely hope that yours comes true more than mine. So that will do it for our preview. I'm going to move on to our one more thing segment here, and I just want to say, if you are if you tune in, obviously we love that you do that every week, but obviously liking and subscribing is free. Please do that as well. If you think that maybe you might need some new clothes, you might want to support the podcast at the same time, hey, we can help you out there. You can do that at shop.rblrsports.com. Go on and check out all of the designs that we have got going on there. Eureka, our producer, has been working on all sorts of stuff, and I like that. I've been I got a shirt recently for a birthday gift, as I said last week, and it has been a hit. So please follow my lead and do the same thing there. They are pretty cool, the shirts that we have, and if you use the promo code COYR, you will get 10% off the order. Obviously, that makes everything better. The other thing that I want to say, huge congratulations to the Seattle Sounders for winning the CONCACAF Champions League, the first MLS team to do so since it became the Champions League, as opposed to the prior, I think it was the North American Continental Cup, whatever it was. But Seattle Sounders will be the first team to, because of that win, take part in the FIFA Club World Cup. The LA Galaxy, this is an interesting little bit of trivia. The LA Galaxy, when they won it in 2000, were supposed to compete in the Club World Cup, but FIFA had to cancel it that year because of different, whatever reasons. It was a weird thing. So LA Galaxy never actually got to do it, and then FIFA did not have the tournament for a couple years. It came back, and since then, I'm pretty sure, other than possibly when Deportivo Saprissa won it, it has always been Mexican clubs going to that tournament. So now North America will have an American team representing, and I think that's pretty cool. Congrats again to them, and they deserve it for a very, very good tournament here. But that is going to do it for us this week on RBLR Rowdies Show. Please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at RBLR Sports. I am also on Twitter. You can get at me at RBLRJamesK. You can use the hashtag AskRBLR if you'd like. But we have another co-host here, Carlos. Can they reach out to you if they would like to do that?
Yes, they can. Come follow me on Twitter at CarlosTPA10. Always posting Rowdies, always posting USL content, and the occasional Sunderland AFC retweet like I did today. That was, super random. But ever since I watched Sunderland Till I Die, highly, highly recommend that documentary if you haven't seen it on Netflix. Keeping up with them every once in a while. I want to give a quick shout out to them for that last-minute stoppage time winner to send them to Wembley in the League One playoff.
Oh, wow.
Super cool to see that playing out, live after watching the documentary last year. So come follow me on Twitter. We'll have a good time, and you can see my terrible takes and my bold hot takes, like my 2-1 Phoenix Rising W this upcoming week. So
exactly.
Thanks for a great conversation today, James. Thanks for everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. So please like and subscribe to our podcast. You can do that on the Spotify and iHeartRadio app, on Apple and Google Podcasts, and YouTube and all other major podcast platforms. We are wherever you are. But for RBLR Sports, ahead of a big game, we just want to say, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.